The Normative Framework of Business Ethics in Peru, Progress and Challenges, is a presentation prepared by Mario Pasco and Levi Del Águila, professors of the Department of Management Sciences at the Pontifical Catholic University of Peru for the 22nd International Conference on Knowledge, Culture, and Change in Organizations, organized by the University of Auckland and Common Ground Research Networks. The presentation is organized into 5 sections. The first section introduces the research problem. The next one addresses the analytical framework that oriented the investigation. Then we describe the methodological design of this study. The fourth section reports the main findings of the research. Lastly, we offer some conclusions based on these findings. Business organizations have an increasing effect on all spheres of human activity, so there is a growing concern for their ethical behavior regarding internal and external stakeholders. Most studies have focused on describing ethical practices in business organizations, often addressing only certain groups of firms. There are some national studies in the United Kingdom, New Zealand, United States of America, and Australia. So research is limited in developing countries. In addition, few studies have combined quantitative and qualitative approaches in a large sample of cases. In Latin America, and in Peru in particular, this lack of knowledge is paradoxical, considering the endemic problems of corruption. Therefore, there is a need for more precise diagnostics on the extent to which companies have been developing an ethical approach, especially regarding the construction and implementation of an internal normative framework. The theoretical and empirical literature on firms' ethical behavior has distinguished 6 groups of practices: internal instruments, external standards, specialized offices, training activities, schemes of reporting, and control mechanisms. The development and implementation of internal instruments is the most frequent practice in most companies worldwide. The codes of ethics are statements that determine the key values, principles, and rules to regulate firms' relationships with their internal and external stakeholders so as to promote ethical conduct and prevent wrongdoing. In turn, ethical policies are instruments aimed at regulating more specific ethical topics such as information confidentiality, employee discrimination, harassment, conflict of interests, and gifts. In certain industries, general policies are accompanied by sector-specific ones. For example, policies on sustainability in the mining industry and policies on responsible consumption in the beverage industry. The effectiveness of these instruments depends on their publicity, clarity, precision, applicability, reviewability, and enforceability, and the connection with participatory processes with involved stakeholders. Some studies report the presence of ethics codes in 55% to 90% of companies, and ethical policies in 71% of them, though there are considerable differences regarding sampling procedures. The purpose of this research was to analyze the level of incidence and depth of internal ethical instruments in the most important companies in the country. The study was based on the structured observation of ethical practices reported on the websites of a probabilistic sample of 265 companies out of the top 10,000 in Peru, as well as in the analysis of 11 cases of companies corresponding to different industries with outstanding ethical performance through documentary analysis and in-depth interviews. The analysis of data involved the report of the level of incidence and the internal normative instruments, such as ethics codes and policies, and the open coding of the ethical approach in the company's mission, vision, values, and principles.
Now we will present the main results of the study. Less than half of the companies include an ethical approach in their mission, less than a third in their vision, and, as expected, the vast majority in their values. On average, firms report 5.2 values, but only 2.2 of them are specifically ethical. When reporting such an ethical stand, the main issues addressed are general approaches, such as sustainability and social responsibility, as well as approaches related to specific stakeholders, such as workers and local communities. The ethical perspective stands out in only 23% of firms' mission, in 30% of firms' vision, and in 51% of firms' values. The analysis examined relevant differences considering the firm's size and industry. 3 size categories were included in the study: large, medium, and small companies, and 9 industries: manufacture, professional services, construction, general services, commerce, education and health, transport and recreation, extractive industries, and food. No important differences were found among companies considering their size, though larger firms appear to have a lower proportion of ethical values regarding other corporate values. However, there are relevant variations considering the firm's industry. Overall, extractive and manufacturing companies report a higher proportion of missions that include an ethical approach. Instead, a lower proportion of corporate missions with an ethical perspective seems to prevail in firms in the service sector. Ethics codes are present in approximately a fourth of companies, while a third of them report ethical principles. Interestingly, more than half of firms have ethical policies. The most frequent type of code or similar normative framework are the codes of conduct, oriented to regulate the personnel behavior. Among policies, prevail those related to privacy, and to a lesser extent, those related to occupational safety and health. There are relevant differences in firms' codes, principles, and policies considering the company's size. Larger firms seem to have a higher proportion of internal ethical instruments and principles. There are also variations concerning the company's industry. Extractive firms have a higher report of ethics codes and policies, though also firms in the education and health industry and in the construction sector. On the contrary, companies in the food sector are characterized by a lower presence of ethical policies. The analysis of the most frequent values and principles reported by the firms reveals that instrumental values, such as work commitment, teamwork, innovation, and excellence, are as important and sometimes even more important than specifically ethical values, such as integrity, respect, responsibility, and honesty. In this vein, the company's concern for the organization and achievement of work aimed at satisfying their customers is often prioritized regarding the concern for other key stakeholders. In conclusion, this research provided the first systematic approach to the analysis of ethical internal instruments in the top companies in Peru. A majority of firms have not aligned their mission, vision, and values with an ethical perspective, and emphasize instead functional and instrumental business approaches. It comes as a surprise that firms report more ethical policies and codes, though this may obey to pressures from legislation and markets. In addition, there seems to be important difference between firms considering their size and industry. In this vein, larger firms and those in sectors with higher levels of social conflict have a stronger internal ethical framework. The analysis of the values and principles of the companies also reveals that many of them do not prioritize the ethical approach over the instrumental one. Lastly, future studies, including a broader set of variables, could provide more precise inferences about the design and implementation of an internal normative framework in companies. This is the list of sources included in this presentation. If you have any question regarding this study, please do not hesitate to contact us. Thanks for your attention.